And then from Yoga 101, we are going to slide to the part where it says the 8 limbs of yoga. Okay. So foundation, the very first tab you guys are under, it's a very, like if you close the notebook all the way, the very first tab. And then it's like, it's 4 pages. Greg, help Eric find it. Show Eric and Rachel where it is. Thanks. Okay. So I try to make our discussions as interactive and interesting as possible. I am also going to tell you that I am recording the lecture. So whatever you say is recorded. So just keep that in mind. We will have times where it's not recorded. So if you have things that are personal that you want to talk about, you can. I make these private just to you all. But, like sometimes you just might not want to relive like a moment in time where you were really emotional about something. You might not want everybody in the group to rewatch it, right? That's like listening to yourself on the answering machine. Okay, so in yoga, there's this guy, you'll get to him later, called Patanjali. And Patanjali wrote the Yoga Sutras, which is like the guidelines of how to practice yoga. So in the West, we kind of have decided yoga is about asana or physical movement, and we get really attached to that concept. And when someone gets hurt, they say, oh, I can't do yoga anymore. I broke my leg. Well, the asana is just one of 8 parts of yoga. It's just in the West, we've decided that's the part we want to focus on. We don't want to do meditation. We don't want to do breathing. It's just, let's just do some movement and get our bodies looking a certain way. And that comes from just culture and marketing and ways to make money. It's a lot harder for yoga studios to make money around teaching people how to meditate than telling them they'll have a better body. So we're going to talk about each of the 8 limbs. And the 8 limbs come from the path of Ashtanga, which means 8 limbs. That is the original practice that I studied. The 8 steps are guidelines on how to live a meaningful or purposeful life according to this path. When you do your history of yoga, you're going to see there's different paths. So Kundalini, which is what Katie's studying now, is a little different. And power yoga is a little different. Raja yoga is a little different. So they're all a little different. But they're all ultimately the core of what they're teaching is the same. So this is the path that we're going to look at for our purposes. I find that it's not so esoteric. It's not so out there and heady. So it's a little bit easier for people to understand than like Tantra, for example. That can be really heady. So we're going to,
Side note real quick. If anybody's like, as we're going through, if they're out of order or anything, just let me know. I did have my 13-year-old help me, so there could be a but I think they should be pretty good.
Child labor. We have that recorded now. I did recruit some. Okay. So the first part, we're going to go through the yamas and the niyamas, and this is kind of your moral and ethical ways of living to reach enlightenment. And enlightenment in the West and in our householder jobs, let's back up and just remember, maybe you guys don't know this, that yoga was created for people that were not householders. They were people who were on a spiritual path that sometimes would fast, meditate all day, not talk to people. They didn't hold jobs. They lived apart from everyone. They did not have children or responsibilities outside of finding spiritual enlightenment. Does anybody in this room care to do that with the rest of their life? Maybe. You can. But most people are like, no, I'm good. I was waiting for Greg to raise his hand. I'm out. So most of us still need to work. Most of us, if you have kids, you might still want to see your kids. You might want to stay married. These people weren't married either. Okay. They had their own little bubble. So we're going to talk about how these things relate to now and how they apply to Western culture, and just know in the back of our minds that we're maybe not going towards enlightenment. We're going to like more peace in our life and more, peace of mind, peace of body. Is that clear? Okay. All right. So the first part is the yamas. This is the ethical standards and sense of integrity, focusing on our behavior and how we conduct ourselves in life. The universal practices that best relate to what we know as the golden rule: do unto others as you would have them do unto you. So the first thing you have to be able to do is really start looking at how you live your life before anything else. If you are stealing from people, it's going to be really hard for you to reach enlightenment or peace, right? Because you're stealing and it makes you kind of anxious. You're like, what if I get caught? What if I go to jail? So we're going to go through some really basic ethical things, but these ethical things are important to keep your mind clear as you move further. The 8 limbs aren't linear. They're more of a wheel. You kind of cross in and out of them. And sometimes some of them are going really well and some of them are not going so well. We'll have an assignment on that. And you can move in and out of them, okay? The 5 yamas. The first one is ahimsa, and this is nonviolence. Nonviolence, back in the day, this is where you get a lot of people who are yoga teachers who are vegetarian or vegan because they pull ahimsa from nonviolence. When I first got into yoga, you were vegetarian. That was a thing. And I actually was vegetarian for a long time, up until I had kids. And Anna Forrest was the first yoga teacher who I know of that openly said, she's Native American. I eat meat and I am conscious about where that meat comes from. And I am very grateful and I pray in gratitude for the source of where my food and my nourishment is coming from. But when I tried to be vegetarian, this is Anna speaking, it was not good for my body. I was not healthy. I was starving. I was not in my best place. So dietary wise, I'm not going to tell you guys how to eat, but maybe you can consider, like, are there places in my diet that I can change? What's the sources? Where's my food coming from? Am I grateful? If I'm eating animals, am I grateful for the fact that something died for me to eat it? That's where that practice comes from. Ahimsa is also like how you treat other people. So we don't hit, like things you teach kids. We don't bite. We don't spit on people. We don't say terrible things to people. It's how you speak and how you treat people. And then it's also how you treat yourself. That gets kind of forgotten. Human beings understand to be nice to each other, but oftentimes we're really not nice to ourselves. And that can look like the way you speak to yourself. It can look like habits that you have that aren't good for you. It can even look like healthy things like, oh, well, I run, but then maybe you run every single day 50 miles and your body starts to break down and you're like, well, I'm just going to keep going because this is what I do, right? So nonviolence has a lot of different aspects on what that looks like and how that looks. And like, for Greg being a police officer, part of his job involves force, right? But for him, it's not that he's going to be like, sorry guys, went to teacher training. You just go ahead and shoot me because I'm not going to shoot you back. For him, it's going to be making more conscious decisions about how he uses force. Is it necessary? Is it to save myself or someone else? Or am I doing it just because I'm in a position of power and I can? That would be kind of a different differentiator on how are you using this in your life, okay? Anybody have questions on that one? We're going to go into self-reflection as part of your assignment. You're going to get to look at how these are going for you. Satya, truthfulness. So this is just like your basic, am I being truthful? But it's also the ways that we kind of like stretch the truth, omit things, move things around. Like being truthful is really hard, especially when it comes down to like, am I going to hurt somebody's feelings or am I going to get in trouble? I learned as a kid that if you told the truth, you were going to get in trouble and you might get beaten for it. Like it just was like, it was terrifying to think I could get in trouble for something. So as a kid, and all of my siblings, we could tell you a lie straight to your face and not even process that it was a lie because our brain goes, this is how you protect yourself from getting hurt. And it doesn't register as false information. So truthfulness can go a lot of different ways. It can be how you say you're using your time versus how you are using it, lots of different things. Any questions about that one? No? Asteya, non-stealing. So this is like physically non-stealing, like don't take things that aren't yours. But there's also an energetic to non-stealing, not stealing people's time. That's a big one you see as a yoga teacher. You make people feel good, and then they just like, they show up for class 45 minutes early and they stay 10 minutes after, and they want to sit with you for coffee and talk to you about all the things. There's a difference between drawing lines and like boundaries with people and letting people just suck you dry. Any of you ever experienced that? There's time suckers out there. Kids. Yeah, those kids, man. So that's a physical and a mental non-stealing, and be aware of how you do it. Like, how are ways that you steal time from other people or things that maybe aren't tangible? That's a pretty big one when you really kind of think about it a little bit harder. Okay, brahmacharya. Everyone, let's talk about this one. So back in the day, brahmacharya was basically abstinence. It was not having sex, sexual purity. In yoga and in that Eastern philosophy, there's they believe in something called ojas. Have you talked about this in Kundalini?
A little bit.
And it is what's like the sacred life fluid or source, okay? And it's very, very potent. And they believe in that you have to contain this fluid. You have to make sure that you keep your life force really strong by not just going around and, doing whatever. So back in the day, just same as priests, like they were just celibate. Now, when you look at it, I had Dandapani, who's a friend of mine, who's a former monk, explain it to me in a way that like makes more sense with Westerners. It still is related to sexual celibacy, but not in, we're householders, right? So you don't want to be like, well, now I'm in teacher training, shop's closed. It's not like that, but think back to like when you were in college or high school or like young, like 19, 20, and you first had like a relationship with somebody, like a sexual relationship with somebody. And you just kind of were like, let's just have sex 3 or 4 times a day and lay around and not do anything. And then other parts of your life probably started to suffer, right? Your friends were like, I haven't seen you in forever. And then your job was like, hey, you were late like twice this week. And then your grades were like, hey, you didn't do so hot in that area either. At the time, it seemed like a really good idea, right? But you're wasting a lot of your life force energy, okay? If you want to get even like more, I don't know, I don't want to use the word religious, but it's the first word that comes to mind. Like, and you think to ojas is like what makes life. So it's fluid that makes lives. You put them together, you create a human, right? And ultimately, that's a pretty sacred thing. And you kind of don't want to just be like throwing that around, right? So does this remind you, these yamas and niyamas so far, do they remind you of any other sacred text? What? Somebody shout out the most obvious one. Yeah, the 10 Commandments. This came before that. This is older than Jesus. So these philosophies have been around for a long time. So it's not like for us, yes, Greg? OJAS. It's not that, like I said, it's not don't have sex for Westerners. It's just like be really mindful about it and be mindful about the intention. Intention's a big one. And same as like if you're single. It's not like, okay, well, you probably don't want to just like go around and every night have a different person. That's not good for your energy. It's not a moral, ethical thing. It's like you're just kind of like a little bit here, a little bit here. This is just not good for you. So that's part of it. Really not the path of enlightenment. Okay, aparigara. That's the next one. Oh, did anyone have questions about that? Anyone want to dive? We're going to talk about sex and poop and all kinds of stuff in here. Anyone have questions about that one? Comments? No? Okay. The next one is not coveting. That is highly, I don't know how that came up that way. That's actually a copy from, I don't like the way that word looks. It's not coveting what other people have. So it's not looking at like, well, Rachel has such and such and such and such, and I want that. And, like just wanting what other people have, desiring what other people have, just being grateful for what you do have. It's hard. It's just hard, to not be like, well, I wanted that, or so-and-so went on vacation 6 times last year and I haven't been on vacation in years. It's those kinds of statements of like comparison. Any questions on that one? That one's pretty straightforward. Okay, the niyamas. So this is the second limb. The yamas are over here. And then you have the niyamas. Yeah, go ahead, Eric.
Well, I did have a question on the
Brahmacharya. Uh-huh.
Yeah, so you said that in the old times it was celibacy.
Mm-hmm.
But now, as a yogi in present time, it's about
Intention.
intention.
Yeah, like being just more mindful than like not just having sex for the sake of having sex.
So intention about sexual.
Yeah, uh-huh. Yep. Yeah, and that one is related. I mean, there's spin-offs on it where they relate it to things that aren't related to sex, but that's really where it came from back in the day. So I'm going to just keep it there. I think the spin-offs come from people being uncomfortable talking about that with their teacher trainees or their yoga practice people. And they're like, well, let's just make it something not sexual. I really, honestly, that is what it is. So it's just being really mindful and intentional.
May I ask, how are you intentional?
Well,
I mean, your husband's
Well, to go back to like when you like maybe we're early on in a relationship and you're like, let's have sex 4 times a day. Like that's not really necessary or intentional use of your energy. Okay. There's other ways you can spend time with someone. And that's for each couple, it's different. For some couples that might still be able to be every single day. For some couples that might be like once a month, but they're both really into it. And it's not just like, well, let's just have sex for the sake of having sex, right? Yeah, or if you're gonna sleep with other people, like being mindful and intentional of what that looks like. Just being really conscious of how you're using that energy, because sexual energy is really powerful. That gets right into that power over, power under dynamic, and men and women can manipulate people through sex. Think about that for a second. You could probably all think of you being manipulated or manipulating someone else around sexual activity. Everybody's like, yeah. But we're human beings. This stuff came from universal things that human beings do. And it's not everything that you're going to do in this training is not out of judgment. It's out of awareness. So there's stuff in here, and there's going to be stuff that I share with you guys that like, I know a lot of my shit. There's still places that are blind spots for me, but I know a lot of it because I've worked with it. And I can say, yep, this is an area for me. This is something that I have to be aware of. And it doesn't mean I never do it. It just means I'm faster to go, oh, I'm doing the thing that I do. I've told people in teacher training straight up out of the front, and I'll tell you guys this at this point because I'm thinking about it. I am really good at manipulating people. I'm just really smart, and I can see 3 or 4 steps ahead of how my actions will lead out to an end result. And so I've used that before to go, well, if I do this, then I know this person will do this. And so I tell you guys that because it's something that over probably the last 5 or 6 years, I've started to go, that's not cool. I'm doing that to manipulate that person to get an end result. So now I try not to do that. I'm getting better. 8 times out of 10, I won't do it. But sometimes I'll be like, I know exactly how to get this person. And it's like psychological warfare. And now some of you are afraid of me. So it's not to look at yourself and go, oh my God, I do this thing from the yamas. I am failed as a yoga teacher. It's to go, I do this thing. This is an area that I can work on. I do this thing. And if I want to get more clear in my life, this is something that I can work on. We all do the things. We all do everything on here. It's just varying times in our life that maybe it's more than others.
It all seems pretty tied back to the truthfulness you happen to be.
Yeah.
And we're being honest with ourselves.
Mhm.
Without being fitted.
Yeah. It does kind of tie pretty hard back to that one. So once you get into the ethics part, which is kind of the yamas, and you dive into the niyamas, which is your self-discipline and your spiritual observances. So these are things that are kind of the next level. Okay. The niyamas, saucha is the first one. That is cleanliness. I shower every single morning. And even if I know I'm going to go to yoga, I shower before I go to yoga. And then Greg showers like 9 times a day. It's important to me that I'm clean when I practice yoga because it's a spiritual practice, right? Not so that you don't offend the person next to you, but it's just like a changing of the clothes and a ritual of like, I don't go and like for 2 or 3 days and then get on my mat and be all stinky. Like that kind of defeats the spiritual practice. But cleanliness can be what you put in your body. It can be what you eat. It can be how you physically take care of yourself. It can be like just clean clothes. It's really hard to get further on the spiritual practice if you smell bad.
Well, I mean, it's everything too. Like, not that your house has to be clean, but like, is your desk at work all cluttered? Can you get work done when you're like that? That kind of all goes back to the energetics of it too. Is like, if you're all dirty on your mat, what exactly are you clearing out and cleaning? If you're not
space. Yeah, your physical space will make a difference for sure. Just how does energy flow when your house feels really dirty or when your house feels really clean? There's a difference. Again, it doesn't mean you're perfect. There's no judgment around it. It's just like, well, how does my space feel when it's dirty? Drives me personally crazy, but it didn't always used to drive me crazy.
It's funny though, like the more that you like do this stuff, it just kind of like falls into place by itself. Like I can't not make my bed in the morning now.
Yeah.
Like it's like even if it's like just a little like pull it up, go
Yeah.
pull it up, like
Yeah.
I cannot be like down, and it makes a huge difference for the rest of the day. Like I have to tidy up the stuff in my bathroom or whatever. And my car has to be pretty neat.
Your energy doesn't.
Never like that before.
Your energy doesn't flow properly, and it's the discipline, because this is a discipline and yoga is a discipline. So you start to like take those little disciplinary things into your life.
And it doesn't have to matter right now. It might just matter at some point.
Yeah. Santosha is contentment. Yeah.
So the military general, he did a commencement speech to
But making your bed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's
There's a whole book about it.
Yeah, but it's the first task you do every day that you can succeed in, and you should start your day with that, which is great. It's awesome.
And yet you don't make the bed. I made it this morning. That was one of the things that Dandapani had told me too. He was like, just like making your bed is just one of those things that it's an energetic symbol of like, I'm going to intentionally move to the next step of my day. And I don't know. I mean, I'm the same as you, Katie. I'll just pull the blankets up and throw the pillows on the end. There's not like military corners done, but it's just kind of maybe one day. All right, so moving to the next one, Santosha is contentment. And again, just being not coveting, but also being content with where you are in your life. Yeah. Yes, you are correct. That is an N. Change that. Yes, Santosa. Thank you, Katie. Spell check doesn't check these words because they're not in the, yeah. So, you have not coveting what other people have, and then you just have being content with what you have. And there's times in your life where that's going to be really hard. Like when things suck, it's hard. If you're sick, it's hard. If you have like a life-threatening disease, that's also going to be really hard. I can't speak from experience on that, but there's just times where it's like, oh, man, this really sucks. I wish blah, blah, blah. But wishing blah, 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 blah doesn't actually change anything, right? You can have desires to make changes, but you can also be settled with where you are as you desire to do differently. There's a difference between being like, I'm here, I want to be here, than spending all your energy going, I wish I wasn't. You see the difference? I wish I wasn't poor, broke, sick, all the things. Again, that's a human experience. I mean, is there anybody in this room who hasn't been super ill or injured at some point in your life? Right? I mean, probably all of us in this room have experienced financial difficulty at some point in our life. Like there's just times where life freaking sucks. And so it's learning to just be able to be in that moment and also not get stuck in it, which is where the next one comes in. Tapas. So tapas translates to heat. This is a tricky one to explain to people, but it's like the fire that keeps you motivated, the fire that keeps you going, the fire that keeps you disciplined. It in Vinyasa yoga or Kundalini yoga can be a literal building up of internal heat. So when you do Ujjayi breath, that in and out, it builds warmth, and that warmth internally helps burn off excess. That can be physical excess, that can be mental excess. So that's from a physical standpoint. When you do Vinyasa yoga, power yoga, Kundalini yoga, you're building tapas, you're building heat, and that heat is then going to be utilized to burn excess off. That also looks like, let's go back to like, when you've had, anybody had mono or the flu? Like, yeah. And you've been sick for like a month and you have felt bad for a month. How hard is it once your body is not in motion to get it going again? It's hard, right? And that can be also with like depression. When you're feeling like just slow and sluggish, it's hard to get that rajas, that tapas going, that heat moving. And we look at that in yoga, and that could be as simple as like just getting up and taking a walk. When I had mono, I remember my mom being like, I know you don't feel well, but you have just got to get your body moving. Like get up and take a walk around the block and then come back. And so yoga can help you build that tapas through heating type practices. Pranayama can also help with that as well. We won't dive too far into that today. Any questions on that?
What does it mean by spiritual austerity?
Kind of,
Like austerity, I understand is like frugal, right?
it's like spiritual practice. It's like the discipline of your spiritual practice. So like the discipline of your meditation, of your physical yoga, of your pranayama, that requires that forward momentum. I kind of think of it as like forward momentum.
I was gonna say, like this morning I got up, I try to get up at 4:30 and do like a Kriya meditation and a little bit of yoga. And like this morning I got up and I like just could not do the Kriya, but I still did the pranayama meditation part of it. And like just that discipline of doing it,
Yep.
even though I didn't like create heat, like
Yeah.
quote unquote heat, it
Right.
was still creating heat in like another way. Like
It's that,
discipline.
it's like it's the momentum. It's momentum of continuing to go. So there's going to be a time in your training and even in your physical yoga practice where you're like, I don't feel like doing this anymore. And that's where you have to dig into that tapas of like, I have to keep doing this. Whether it be, like you said, maybe you don't do asana that day. Maybe you just breathe and meditate and that's your practice. But it's that discipline of I do this practice, because you don't get to just be like, I quit. And then, or I'm going to take a month-long break and then still expect to be on the path towards enlightenment. And remember, we're not using enlightenment as like transcending, but we're using as like peace of mind, peace of body. You don't get to just be like, I'm going to lay on the couch for the next 2 weeks and watch Netflix and I am on my way. Things are going to be good. Right? So it's that discipline. What that looks like for me, I try to get up most mornings, 5:15, go meditate for 20 minutes. I try to get to my yoga mat at least 5 times a week. And sometimes it's not easy. And sometimes it sucks. And sometimes it doesn't happen, but then I don't go, well, that was fun while it lasted. No, not 5 times a day. No, you can burn out. If you build too much heat, what happens? Yeah, you melt, or things catch on fire and they burn out. So yeah, you don't get too excited. That can happen too. Okay, Svadhyaya, the study of the sacred scriptures and of oneself. So this is learning about yoga and about you. That's also where the therapist ties in really nicely. Self-study. So once you're done with your 200 hour, you're not done. Like you're not like, all right, I know everything there is to know. It's that learning of text, it's learning of yoga, it's learning about life. There's just always a little bit more. But then you can circle back to contentment. You don't have to know everything. You don't have to take every single teacher training, because some of us will go off the deep end with that one. Well, I got to take all the trainings before I can teach anything. You don't want to go too far. It's a balance. But just that self-study. Who am I? What makes me work? What are my buttons? What are my blind spots? What are the places that I do really well? What are the places that I need work? What are the places that I do the things that I do? Yeah. And then once you identify it, you can be like, oh, I was doing the thing, right? I mean, you and me and Erica, like we've had those conversations. And what's really cool about it is then once you know your stuff, you can have conversations with other people about your stuff. And you'd be like, I'm sorry, I was doing the thing, Katie, where I get really controlling and I decide that you have to do this way. And then Katie can be like, well, I was doing the thing where I blah, 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 blah. And then we're like, okay, cool. Well, let's do better. And it makes for like some more human conversations when you can see someone, when you can see yourself, then you can see someone else and accept them for who they are without expecting them to be perfect. Because as you're going through this list with me, you're probably like, oh, I do that. Okay, so moving along. Ishva Pranayadana, surrender to God. Now, this doesn't have to be the picture of God with the white beard sitting up in the clouds. This is your understanding of something higher than yourself. That can be nature. Because if nature decides that right now we're going to have a big earthquake and a big crack comes down, we all fall down to the ground, there's nothing we're going to do to stop that, right? That is a force higher than ourselves. It can be your understanding of religion, whatever that is. And it's just knowing that there is something at play that is more powerful than you. Is that clear? And whatever that is, I think that that's a really cool concept because sometimes you just have to be like, wow, these mountains didn't get here because of me or this. It allows you to kind of take in the awe of the world and step out of the ego. Because there's a lot of cool things happening that have nothing to do with you. You just get to absorb it and be a part of it. Questions about that?
Could you
Yeah.
expand again on that Santosa contentment?
Yes. So it's just being content with where you are. Happy, not even happy, accepting of where you are today. That doesn't mean that you're not willing or desiring to go further or do better. It's just not wishing that things weren't the way that they were, not getting stuck in, oh, I just wish I had more money and I wish I had a new car and I wish that, like the long laundry list of everything that's wrong with your life.
I have to say this is something that like you can even have on your shittiest days. Like I teach at the Shaw Cancer Center. People that have cancer
yeah.
still have, contentment in what they have. So, it's not, doesn't always mean that things are rainbows and butterflies, but
Yeah, I think that's important.
It's like remembering gratitude. Yeah, but it's like kind of upside down right now. But what are the good things about it?
Right.
Even though it feels like everything is actually on fire,
Mm-hmm.
it's not.
Right.
And just look around and find like 3 things. Oh, okay, this is working. That's
Mhm.
working. I always think first world problem.
Yes. I mean, really, honestly, first world problems. Yeah. Yeah. We have clean water. We got some food. It does keep you in a place of not getting stuck because if you, yeah, because if you just go down the rabbit hole, we could all list a whole plethora of things that didn't go right in our life, that aren't going right in our life, that we want to be different, right? We could totally do that. But that,
we all throw our shit in the same pile. We probably want to take our own stuff back out.
yeah, that's also true. Yeah. We did an exercise once at one of the staff meetings, and this was after some of the teachers told me that their life was just so busy that they couldn't come to staff meetings or something along those lines. And we all sat together and went around the circle and just talked about one thing. Were you there for that one? You were. Like one thing that you guys don't know that like I'm dealing with right now. And when everybody goes around the circle, it's like we all have 1 or 2 or 3 big things that we're dealing with that we just don't talk about. And when you put them all in the room, it was like, yeah, so you don't get to not show up today because so-and-so showed up and they have this going on, and so-and-so showed up and they have this going on. We all have stuff. And that's a really powerful thing to remember in a lot of times. Yeah. All right, moving forward. So those are the yamas and the niyamas. You are going to have an assignment that I will send you about them. You're going to define them. And then you're going to do a little journal exercise on how are each one of these going for you. It could be real small. Like, okay, ahimsa, nonviolence. This is one that I feel like I have pretty dialed in, couple self-reflections. And then maybe you get to one that you're like, I'm really struggling with this one. This is what is going on. And this is how I want to see it go differently.
When you don't know like how to practice Body Yo, which is what we just talked about, this is like a really great step to just kind of learn how to start learning about yourself.
Mm-hmm. Notice too where you hold back, and notice the places that like you might try to censor or filter yourself, because we all have those self-protecting mechanisms that we go, oh, I shouldn't say this, so I'm not going to admit it. And that prevents self-study. That prevents you from moving forward because you're not admitting or willing to look at something that is something you want to work on. So anything you guys send us in homework assignments are confidential. And Greg, you're welcome to just send yours straight to Heather if you want.
And then I'll share with you about
Then we'll sit around and talk about it. But these are confidential. These aren't going to get shared with anyone. You are welcome to share with people, but I want you to start to peel back some of the things that you hold up as walls from being transparent with yourself. Because to be a good yoga teacher, these are the things that are going on in your students' lives. These are the things that are going to walk through the door. And when you can see them in yourself, then you have empathy for the people who are coming through the door, for where they are in their life, and you're able to serve them from things that are genuine. And not just peace, love, and light, everybody. Yay.
So like a private Facebook page, because I feel like this would be good stuff we could do kind of together.
For you guys, yeah, I do. And I need to add you to it. Yes, please remind me or email me. Okay. So I'm going to move forward because we're going to wrap up in a couple minutes so that we can take a break. Okay. So the third limb is asana. This is probably Yuri telling me the code now. Everybody's familiar. Oh, yeah, it is. Would you guys like to know the Wi-Fi code now that we're almost done? Maybe write it down. Dusty Boot Guest is the thing. And then welcome guest is the password. Capital W, all one word. Asana is the physical postures. Okay. Originally, this was developed, the physical poses with breath were developed to prep the body for meditation so that you could sit on the floor and meditate. The physical asanas also help keep you healthy. They help prana or energy move through the body. If you're sick, it's really hard to meditate. It's really hard to get to the later stages of the 8 limbs. So these are, it says in here, like the literal translation of pranayama, life force extension. Yogis believe that it not only rejuvenates the body, but extends life itself. So you see stories of like yogis that are 101, 102, 103 and still practicing physical asana because they started when they were in their 20s. Yoga asana was originally developed for young boys to help give them discipline in order to sit when they were more mature to meditate. So yoga asana was actually for kids who were considered immature. Yes. It was to burn off that extra energy so that they could then sit and learn the other things. But now we just really like this. Sean calls it the side effects. And I really like that. So Sean Korn's one of my teachers, and she says, one of the side effects of yoga is that you might have a higher, tighter butt. One of the side effects of yoga is that your skin might start glowing. Like those are not necessarily the reasons for it. Those are just things that happen because of it. It's just those side effects are often why people come in the door. So asana is important, but it's just one little piece. Pranayama. This is your breath control techniques to gain mastery over the respiratory process. Your brain, your mind, and your emotional states are all connected. So what's the first thing that people generally say to someone who's really upset? Yeah, take a deep breath, right? And what happens when you take a deep breath? Your nervous system starts to calm down. Yeah. So our breath regulates our nervous system. And we've kind of forgotten about that until you realize when you're feeling anxious that you're not actually breathing consciously. Yes, you're breathing, because otherwise you'd be dead on the floor. But breathing consciously. When you're in a yoga class, learning to connect that breath and to give more oxygen to your muscles and to calm your nervous system is one of the reasons why you feel so good afterwards. Because most of our day, we all go like little rabbits. The breath is an amazing, amazing tool. When you go back to that definition of pranayama, you're manipulating prana or life force in the body through the breath. That can be, and we'll talk about this more later, that can be overdone. You don't study advanced pranayama techniques without a teacher. I'm going to teach you basic, safe ones, but there are some things out there that are crazy and intense and advanced, and you can practice them on YouTube, and you might go crazy. I've seen it in person. If you start messing with the oxygen in your body, it's going to change your brain, and it can be not good. It takes a while. It's not going to be like one YouTube session and you've gone off the deep end, but I have seen people who have sat and started doing this for hours at a time and messing with their breath, and then they don't, or you know who I'm talking about, and then they no longer have a sense of reality. We had a teacher that this happened with YOB, and I had to let him go. It's possible. If you want to do these things, then good. Find a pranayama master teacher. I'm not it. I know about the basics. I've been taught some of these advanced teachers, but I am not it. So make sure you have a teacher. Okay. Well, you guys will have some pranayama that's great tools later. Okay. When you start breathing in yoga class, the nervous system starts calming down, and then you get to the next one, which is pratyahara, the withdrawal of the senses. You might experience this in yoga class. This is where we start doing one pointed focus. The focus of the mind is on the breath, the inhale and the exhale. And you start to slow down those fluctuations of your mind. You start to slow down the look squirrel, right? That's the next step towards starting to get to meditation. You're still aware, your senses are still there, but you're starting to pull back a little bit. Have you ever noticed how in yoga classes, you may have the opposite experience of this, but you're like, wow, time's up. It's why we don't have a clock. Like there is a clock in there, but I try to make sure people can't read it because I don't want you guys looking at the clock. I want you to get into your body. I want you to feel what's happening inside of you. I like to close my eyes for that reason during practice because it helps me withdraw just one more sense. So this is when you're looking at, getting towards meditation, getting towards enlightenment. Not every yoga class is going to withdraw the senses. Some of them are going to actually be a sensory experience, and that's fine too. Dharana. Okay, so once you do withdrawal of the senses, that creates the setting for the next step. So having taken away the outside distractions, we can now deal with the distractions of our mind. This is kind of hard. This is like one pointed focus of your mind. So this is like your basic, when you start meditation and you sit down and you're like breathing in, breathing out, breathing in, breathing out. Yeah, right? Right? So like it's just that one pointed focus. A mantra could be that too when you do mala with mantra. That's the next step. Can I focus on just one thing? That's usually fleeting. It'll happen for like maybe 30 seconds. And then your brain goes, when you get home, don't forget to do such and such. And then you're like, oh, wait, breathing in, breathing out. And then you call it back. It's a practice. It's not easy. You're flexing the muscle of your mind. And the longer you can start to go, oh, you're not aware, come back. Those gaps will get of concentrating will get longer and longer and longer and longer until you're able to get to the next step. Where am I here? Of dhyana. So this is when you're in that uninterrupted flow of concentration. And you've got the one-pointed attention, you've got the withdrawal of the senses, the mind is quiet, and it has few or no thoughts at all. Super still. And then what happens is you go, oh, I'm doing it. And then that's it. And then you're done. You probably get to that point in Shavasana and you're like, usually what happens for me is I find that I'm there and then like they're pulling you out of Shavasana. It takes a while for you to get there, or I get there in meditation and then something happens and I'm like, I lost it. Just like the earlier part, it will get longer and longer the more you practice it. Questions about that? Those three kind of blend together. It's okay. They're all interrelated. They're all about that, getting the mind ready and getting the mind quiet. And then you go to samadhi. This is your bliss state. As soon as you recognize it's happening, it's gone. So I can think of very few times. It has happened to me a couple times, but it's like the second you recognize it, you're like, and it's over. Because it's not a conscious state. So when you see yourself, when you become conscious of the fact that you've reached the state, that destroys it. It's coming from a different layer of consciousness.
I think you guys have Gaia. There's a really good documentary on this.
On what?
Gaia.
On Gaia. Oh, cool. Awesome. So you've transcended the self. It's like this profound connection to whatever it is that is beyond you in your physical body. You can't describe it. You just know, like, until you've screwed it up by knowing. That's like the craziest, it sounds so esoteric to be like, as soon as you're conscious that you're conscious of the unconscious, like it's just, it's something you can't really describe. You just know if you've gotten there, and then the second you know, it's gone. But it is this amazing ability to see that you are something beyond your physical body, might be a good way to describe it. That your soul body is connected to like this universal something that's really bigger than you. For me, that's probably the best way to describe it, is when I'm able to get out of physical body and be like, oh, this is actually what it's about, not this. Does that make sense? Is that a good way to describe that? I don't think I've described it that way before, but that's kind of it. Does anyone have any questions? I went super fast through that, and so we do have time for questions. I just wanted to make sure that we like hit all of them before we go and practice.
What you said on the last one, that Shavasana is when you may experience this sanity. I agree that Shavasana is not long enough. No long.
Especially at the climbing gym, because the classes are
I
short.
would like it to be longer. But as yoga teachers, do we have a set time that we would like it to be?
I train at least 8 minutes, which you won't see in most people's classes, because most people are like physical. They want the physical, so they give them 5 minutes or less, sometimes even as little as 2. I like at least 8 minutes, because it takes 5 minutes for your body to even settle into that space. And then you're like, oh, I'm there. This feels so good. And then the teacher's like, come out. And traditionally, the way you would have done it is you would have done your asana, your pranayama, your shavasana, then sit up and meditate. Because your asana and your pranayama is actually prepping you to sit down and meditate after that. So you traditionally would do all those things, do some breathing, and then sit and meditate for half an hour to an hour or longer, depending on the tradition. And that's what shavasana is, just getting your brain like, oh, we're going to sit quietly. Okay. And then you sit, and then you just do that. There's nothing else other than the sit. Yeah. So if you're practicing at home, probably most of us just don't have the luxury of the quiet. I mean, honestly, if I'm like, yeah, if I were to get up and like do yoga and then meditate afterwards, it's like, I probably don't have the luxury of 90 minutes to accomplish all that without being interrupted. But you could, when you go to retreats and things, that's an option. We're going to do that at least once. When we do the Utah trip, we'll do a practice and then meditate after. So yes, that's, I like 8 minutes. If it's a short class, if it's like Eagle Climbing and Fitness and we have a 45-minute noon class, you only get like 3 minutes. But you haven't spent enough time in the asana to really drop that deep anyway. But if I'm teaching a 60-minute class, it's at least 8 minutes. Yeah.
After we did the Kundalini Kriyas, this is like bare minimum. Sit for 5 minutes and then 11 minutes of Shavasana. But that's like bare minimum. She would usually have us there for like half an hour after everything.
Yeah. Anybody else? Anything on yamas and niyamas? Okay, so your assignment, let me find the assignment sheet so I do this right. We redid the assignment sheet because everybody in the last group, we had a lot of really cerebral people in the last group, and we might in this one too. But they all were like former educators and like John Brunza, superintendent type people. And they're like, wait. Okay, so your 8 limbs, yamas and niyamas, I will email you. I'm just going to guide you guys through this. I'm going to email you an assignment sheet. The assignment sheet is going to have blue links. You click the link and then it will pull up a website like above it that is another link. When you click on that, it will take you to the next piece, okay? And that can trace you back to the lecture notes, which is in your notebook. But if you're like sitting at the computer and you're like, oh, what was that from? You can click on it, okay? I'm going to make the best attempt ever. And if I can't do it, Tia will show me to link the lecture to it as well. So when you click on it, you get a link, and then the link takes you to the assignment description, and then it takes you to the lecture notes. So your assignment that is linked on there, I will get this to you, so don't panic. I know I keep repeating myself, but I mean, Heather saw this. It's like, what? We'll tell you, define each of the 8 limbs of yoga, okay? And then I want you to go in and write about your personal reflection. Doesn't have to be a term paper. A couple sentences is good. But if you really want to dig deep, I'm not going to stop you because you're going to get a lot of really good information about that. Hold on one sec. Right. Anything to add to that, Heather?
No.
Okay. All right. The due date. So I didn't used to give due dates on this, and I'm not going to ask you to turn it in, but these due dates might be helpful for some of you with timing. The due date when to complete this by is 2/10, okay? It was assigned today. That's going to be a column on your assignment sheet. The due date, it has a column that says when to complete by. We don't see each other for almost a month. That should be long enough for you to get it done. Any questions? Good.
Do you want us to turn it into you, or we just put it in our book?
I'd like for you to turn it in. So you can either share the Google Doc with me, you can take a picture of it and email it to me as an attachment, or you can do it in an email document as well. However feels right for you is
Sharing
good.
all this.
I'm not sure that that's the same. No, that's not the right copy. That's the one that's you and me only. Okay, I'm going to end this. All right, so here's what's going to happen.